Hello, everyone. My name is Ray, and I work at the Writing Center, the Robert and Jane Weiner Writing Center. Robert and Jane Weiner being a very appreciative and generous couple who understood the importance for their student to master. Can't hear me? I'm new to this. All right, I'm going to cut it loose now, folks. Who understood the importance of learning how to write and succeed at the academic level at Beacon College. So I'm very grateful to be here tonight, and I'm very honored by your presence and your attention. I spent many years in a traditional studio in Tokyo, Japan, and it's kind of a lonely world. So I'm very, very appreciative that you would come to Venetian Gardens tonight and listen to what I would like to share and impart to you. Daryl said that I wasn't going to spend much time lingering in the past. Well, here we go. Actually, we're going to begin in China. China somewhere in the 9th century. And what we're looking at is one of the first recorded woodblock prints. This was discovered in a cave and sold to, I believe, a British gentleman in the early 20th century, around 1905. And it's actually a very proper theme to introduce Japanese woodblock art. This is from a sutra, the Diamond Sutra. And the theme, of course, of the sutra is how to overcome the suffering of this life and what we can do to live in a better reincarnation. I'm sorry, that's a very brief summary of the Diamond Sutra. There's a lot more in it, okay? But this is a woodblock print. It's carved on wood, the paper is placed on the wood, and it's printed, okay? So all good things Japanese start in China. Oops, now I'm going backwards. Okay, so we have some tools that we're going to begin with. And both of these tools are made of horsehair. This is a horsehair brush. It's a Chinese brush. Okay, as I said, we're going to begin a little bit with the Chinese tradition. Okay, so this is the brush. And this tool is called a baden. Can you see that up there? Baden? How is your Japanese? Can anybody say baden? Baden? Very good. I mean, pretty good. It's your first chance, okay? Yeah, this is a baden. It's very large and it's very heavy, and it's also made of horsehair, okay? So you use the brush to put the ink on the board, and you use the baden to smooth over the paper, okay? I'm sure you all understood that so well, but just in case, let's see if we can make it a little bit clearer. I'm going to show you a video now of a Chinese master using the baden and the brush and making a print. So he's putting the ink on the board with the brush. So this is a gentleman that I visited when I was in China. He pulls the paper over, and now he takes his baden. His is really big. And he makes the print. So the board is kind of prepared now. The second time around, he doesn't need as much time with the ink. He lays the paper down, rubs the bottom, and you get the finished print right there. So that's the Chinese way. That's kind of how things were when it came to Japan. But when it comes to Japan, it changes. Okay, so here we have the Japanese brushes. Okay, they're small and they're handheld. So you hold them in your hand like this, and you put the ink on the board, and then you brush the ink across. Okay. If you look a little closely, you can see the brushes on the left. The two top ones, they look pretty hairy, don't they? They have the frizzies, right? Yeah. So frizzies are not really good for woodblock printing. You don't want to have the frizzies, okay? So what we do is we employ very unusual techniques that involve very sharp skin, okay? So before we can use our brushes, there's a process that you have to go through using the shark skin. And this is what the shark skin board looks like. So what we do is we lay the shark skin board down and we get it wet, and we soak the new brushes for about 20 minutes. And then once we have the brushes nice and soaked and the shark skin's ready to go, we take it and we begin the process of sharpening the brush. So this is the not so nice brush that you see up there, and we begin. And generally speaking, you do 100 times for each side of the brush, so 400 strokes to get it started. Now, why would we do something like that? Well, one of the most important aspects when you're making woodblock prints and you're making hundreds of copies, or let's say a run of 100 at a time, is you want to apply the ink evenly and the same quantity all through 100 prints. My instructor, he would get 102 pieces of paper. He would make 100 prints, all the colors, the same tone, same color value. So when you take these brushes and you sharpen them, so to speak, what it does is it splits these hairs from 1 to maybe 3 hairs. Okay, so now you've got a brush that's super, super sensitive. Okay, and so when you start applying your ink to the board, you have better control over how much ink you need. And I'll explain why that's important in a minute. Okay, so now we have the brushes, and we know that there's some preparation involved. Okay. And I have another video now of him sharpening the brush. This is my teacher. He's getting the brush a little bit wet. So that's kind of what it looks like. Okay, so these are the things that, you know, obviously normal people, normal mortals never get to see or really understand about, you know, the things that happen in a Japanese woodblock studio, but this is one of them. All right, so we have the brushes and you've seen them prepared. Oops, let's see if we can do this. Uh-oh. Oh, I don't know how that picture got up there. I must have not been paying attention. This is one of my proteges. I like to start them out young. By the time they're 11, they're earning their own wage in the studio. So, and that's important. Would you mind playing this for me? So we have it. Well, just a minute. Thank you. Oh, okay. So now the paper is on the board, and we're printing. Okay. She's really going to town there. Yeah, but she needs some help. Ta-da! Ah. Well, reading the room. Well, I can see that we have a group of very empathetic people. That's good. It's kind of a mixture of empathy and kind of quizzical look. Yeah. So I guess what you're wondering is, what exactly is he doing? Or what is he doing to that poor girl's shoulder, huh? Yeah. Well, what we're doing is we're making a print. We're making this print. Okay? This is from about, well, by the way, if you ever find one of these originals, I'll give you $1,000 for it, okay? Because they're worth about $500,000 today if you can find an original. Yeah. But we're making a print, and you could see how hard I was working with that button. I mean, look what the Chinese guy did in 2 seconds, and look what brilliant Dr. Ray Nault did in about 2.5 minutes, huh? Yeah, not impressive, I understand, okay? This is a key block. This is the outline block, okay? And the thing with the key block is that when you print it, you don't want to print very hard. Because this cherry wood, you can get thousands of prints off it if you don't rub too hard. Okay, but you have to rub hard enough so that you get a nice clean outline. Okay, but what I was actually doing there when I was printing is I was looking at the paper. Because as I looked at the paper, I could see this area was dark and this line was still light. So I was trying to get the entire back of that paper the same color black. So that's why it took so long. Okay? Normally, it would probably take me about 5 or 6 seconds. Well, I've gotten a lot better since then, actually. So, okay, I'm lying. Normally, it take me about 20 seconds, okay? But ideally, that's what you would like to be able to do, is very quickly, okay? So that is a key block. Okay, and this is carved on cherry wood. Okay, so I'm still dwelling in the past. I'm sorry, Daryl, but there's some things that these people just need to know. Okay, so we'll say goodbye to China for now. And there is the print that would eventually come out. Okay, and one thing about this print and this type of print is that that background there, you can't really see it, but it's done in mica. So what we do is we take a toilet paper roll and we put a little filter on it, and we drop the mica down the toilet paper roll and we shake it on, and there's animal glue on there, and we brush it on there very quickly, and then you get a shiny background effect. Now this print is very, very interesting because It was printed probably around 1930. And it was still a time where there were many, many, many printers and many, many carvers. And they were still trying to hang on to the past. They wanted to employ these unemployed carvers and printers because this was no longer cool. It really wasn't even cool in 1820. This type of art had a high consumer turnover. They printed and they printed and printed, and then the consumer taste changed. But what's interesting about this print is when they reproduced it, they actually, on the outline there, you can't really see it, but can you see the shading around that figure there? Yeah, they reproduced that to make it look like the mica had oxidized, because they wanted it to look like a print that was from that period. Yeah. So these people, it's just incredible. Like the people who reproduce these things, they really want to reproduce the original. So that's the difficulty when you begin talking about, oh, is this an original or is this a reprint? Many times the reprints, especially like between 1910 and 1940, they're way better than the originals. The paper is better and the technique is better. So that's just so don't if you see a nice print, buy it, okay? All right. Just don't pay $500,000 for it. All right. Okay. So now finally we get into the Japanese world. All right. And we have a woodblock print, very similar to the one that we saw from China. Okay. And the theme for, the first 300 years of Japanese woodblock printing is having fun. Okay, there's two ways to do that. You can go visit a geisha, or you can go to the kabuki theater. Okay, and so this is just like the Chinese print. This is also the cover illustration of a book. The Chinese print that we saw to start, that was an illustration that opened up that book of the Diamond Sutra. This is an illustration of a book. And obviously we have a samurai visiting a geisha, okay? And this is a very common theme. But the difference is, are you familiar with the term ukiyo-e? Ukiyo-e? Well, what you're looking at right now, A means picture, okay? Ukiyo, I'm going to explain to you, okay? So when we talk about these kinds of pictures, oh, I'm sorry. I know you don't like Japanese that much and you're probably tired after that dinner, but can you say ukiyo? Very good, very good. Yeah, I'm looking for a side gig as a Japanese teacher, so yeah, good. So ukiyo. Now, in the Chinese print that we looked at, ukiyo referred to that life of suffering and tribulation and hopefully striving to gain a better reincarnation after you pass on, okay? So that was ukiyo. And what happened when these prints started coming is the Japanese decided they didn't really like that worldview very much. And so what they did was they kept the sounds ukiyo, but they changed the Japanese kanji for it. So now ukiyo meant the floating world, okay? And the floating world means eat, drink, and be merry, okay? Because we're not going to be around very long, okay? Now there were some economic and social factors that led to that change. So now we are in the world of the pleasure quarters, okay? It's a celebration of now, okay? So ukiyo-e is referring to the courtesans, the women of the pleasure quarters, and the thrill seeking that is involved there. Okay. So this is kind of the next step in the printing process. I think we're still in black and white. And one of the first things that you notice is that the women are getting taller and thinner, and the kimono becomes kind of a fashion statement, okay? And we're going to be talking about the kimono a lot tonight, all right? So we have the courtesan culture. By the way, please feel free to raise your hand if you have questions while I'm talking. Okay, so, and we can address them as we go along. Okay. Oh, all right. Now, suddenly we have color. Okay. The Chinese print that we looked at, all the coloring typically is done by hand after that initial black and white print. Although the Chinese did have a tradition, a very strong one, of also printing on multiple blocks. But here we have colors. Now, what we need to try to understand is that for each color, there is a separate woodblock carved. Okay? And all those lovely colors, they have to line up. They can't overlap. Okay? So you don't want that tan color overlapping. Okay? This particular print is also very interesting because it comes from a collection of prints that came out in about 1910. And it was a 12-volume set, and each set had a woodblock print. Each book had 20 original woodblock prints in it. And it was a way to try to save the woodblock carving culture, which I'll get into a little bit later. But this print, if you look carefully, can you see that kind of, in the orange on the left, can you see that blackish kind of smeary look on it? Can you see that at all? Yeah. Again, what they're doing is they're imagining that red ink, which oxidizes and which is metallic, and so they reproduce it. Okay? So, again, these artisans, they're really trying to reproduce the past. All right. We're almost, going to get into the modern era here. Okay. All right. So, now we have woodblock prints, and they're getting very involved. You can see the kimonos are getting very involved. You have all the utensils, and so on. At this point, it becomes very interesting because the title tonight was Japanese Woodblock Art. But honestly speaking, this was never considered art in Japan. This was low art. This was art of the common people. So, as we know, some of the French, they became very enamored and mesmerized and inspired by the Japanese prints in the late 19th century. But as this stuff was going on, it really wasn't considered high art at all. But what happens, and this is in about 1780, is that the woodblock print art is kind of co-opted by the literary and the men of letters and these societies of artists. And they began to include very semi-erotic poems with references to classical literature and all kinds of hidden references inside these pictures. This particular print is a reprint. How do you know that? Huh? It looks like just an innocent cloud floating up there, or maybe it's some kind of ornament or something. But at one time, that cloud had an erotic poem written in it. Okay? And at that time is when the government started coming in and censoring the woodblock industry. So the prints were still very popular. So all they did was they went in and they carved out all the eroticism, boo, and reprinted it. So when you see a print like that, this is Harunobu. His name is Harunobu. Suzuki is easier. Suzuki. When you see a Suzuki print like that, without the clouds, there's something removed there. Okay? All right. So, what does that say? The marvel of the registration mark. Yeah. How do they make all those colors line up so beautifully? You need to know that. That's very important. Okay. So, here we have what's called the key block. Okay? And there's the first impression of the key block. And in the right-hand corner, you can see the registration marks. Okay? Can you see those slots there in the right-hand corner? There's one in the corner and there's one here. Can you see these here? This here? Can you see that? And you see that? That's where they put the paper in. All right? So now, every block has one of these paper holders. So now they can drop the paper in exactly in the same place for each block. Okay? So now they're able to actually put color into these key blocks. All right, so we're going to go through a block. This is one that I carved, or not carved. I didn't carve this. I wish I could. This is one that I printed, okay? So we saw the first block, and now we have the second block. Color brown, okay? You see the brown pop up there? Okay, good. All right, good. Now we have the next block, okay? You see the lower grasses down there, and in the fourth? Yeah, okay, so that's the next block, okay? Now, we got a yellow block. Can you see the yellow go inside the temple light there? Good. And then we got black. Can you see the black coming down on the snow there? And the trees. Okay? All right. Okay, there's the next block. Oh, it's green. Okay, so we got some green on the pine trees. How am I doing? All those lines are lining up. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, no mistakes. Good. Ooh, there's the blue. Now, I don't know how big you think this print is that I'm showing you, but actually, it's this big. This is what I'm printing on. This is a postcard size woodblock print. And this is the fun that you get to have for the first 5 years when you're in a studio. I printed 13 different scenes before I was allowed to go on to bigger prints, okay? Because you have to be able to control your registration mark, okay? So, here we go. I got carried away there. Okay, good. But with these blocks, they're very old. And they've had apprentices such as myself banging away on them and carving on them and printing on them. And sometimes bad things happen. They bow. Okay, and one reason they bow is because people like myself forget to wet the back of the block when it gets dry. And you just keep printing because you love it so much. Okay, and you want to make that $18 a day, you know? You don't want to go out of the studio broke. So, on this particular print, I had to make 2 registration marks, one for the right-hand side and one for the left-hand side. So to make that blue line up, I had to do 2 rubbings instead of 1 because the board had bowed. Yeah, I know, it's rough. Yep. There's the sky, and there's the shadings. Okay, so we're almost there. We almost have the final print. So, after all that, oops, That's not the one we want. I told you there's going to be more kimonos. Yeah. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the final product. So when you see a woodblock print, that's what it took to make such a tiny print like that. Go ahead.
What kind of paper? Is it rice paper?
It's not rice paper. So the paper comes from the mulberry tree. And when I visited one paper maker, I actually got to sit and put my hand. Well, here, let me tell you a story. I haven't told you a story yet. I grew up in the forests of Washington State, and what I used to do in the summer was peel bark. So I had kind of an idea of how they do it. So what they do is they go out and they peel the bark off this tree. And then they throw the bark into this tub of cold water, and then they pick the fiber off the back of that bark. I had the joy of doing that for about an hour and a half with the wife who was 82 years old. Okay? And what we were trying to do is pick all the bark off. And the reason you want to pick all the bark off, and I'll show you in the next slide, is that you don't want any of the bark to stay in the paper and then 40 years later there's a blemish in the paper. Okay, so you want to make sure all that detritus is cleaned out. So as to the paper, they make this big vat, and there's water in it, and then I forgot the scientific name for it. They put some, oh yeah, goop. Yeah, they put goop into the soup. Okay, and I don't know all the ingredients of this goop because they're very closed-mouthed about that kind of stuff. But I know that one of it is arrowroot. Okay, and so they have these different natural materials that the fibers that they put in that help bind the paper, and then they shake it on this big screen and they pull it up out of the water, and then they peel the paper off like that. Yeah, so that's the paper, and paper is a big problem today. It's hard to get really good paper. Okay, all right, you're done very well. You're very patient, but now I want to see. I'm sorry, I was a teacher for very many years, and I need to assess you. Okay, so. But I'm also very pedagogic and kind, okay? So I'm going to give you a chance here. But how about counting the number of rubbings? Okay, this is the print. And now we're going to go through and we're going to count the rubbings. Are you ready? Okay, we'll see. Here we go. Here's the first one. That's the key block, isn't it? All right, very good. 2. 3, 4, 5. Oh, the mystery item. Yeah, 5. 6. There's the underlayer. This was one of those blocks where I had to do separate printings. So when you do postcard blocks, they actually carve 2 blocks, so you're making 2 prints at the same time. Otherwise, it's not worth the money. There's the kimono pattern and the hair ribbon. Yay! Another kimono pattern, because there's not enough patterns on this postcard size yet, is there? There you go. Actually, this one right here is painted off or printed off metal, pewter. So they, particularly difficult ones, they will actually, like even with the key block, they will actually make a pewter outline because it doesn't wear down. Okay? So, and then you use lithographic ink and you roll it on. Oh, are we there yet? I know. Okay, keep going. There's the green. Starting to look good though, huh? Oh yeah, and what's a kimono without cornflower blue flowers, huh? Yeah. There we go. We got the cornflower flowers, the background color, the hairdo done, and the artist's seal, and you get the final print. So that is what you're looking at here. That's what you're looking at here. So it's a little involved, but I wanted to give you an idea of what goes on when we talk about a wood block printing, okay? All right. Oh yeah, that mystery item. What is that? Do you think that's like a pipe or? Because I don't really know. I was hoping somebody here could help me out. Any ideas what it is? Opium. Oh. Well, I'm glad I didn't do any experimenting to find out about that. Okay. Well, here, I have an answer for you. Okay? And this little demonstration is in honor of Daryl Owens. Because Daryl's been really very supportive during this process for me. And Daryl actually told me it was okay to toot my horn. And so I thought I would toot my horn for you tonight. Are you ready? This is called a puppen. P-O-P-E-N. And this is actually the instrument that this young damsel is enjoying. Thank you for letting me toot my horn. All right. So she's puffing on a poppin'. Okay. We're almost done. Yes?
So how many layers was that? 15?
You weren't counting? Huh?
I say 15.
No, I think it was 13. No, it was 14 actually, 14. It was 15 because I had to do that red side twice. Yeah. Oh, we got a question. We'll get you and yeah. Enzo.
How are the wood blocks made?
Pardon?
The wood blocks
How are they made?
and carved.
Okay. You have a tree stump. And you take and you cut boards diagonally off the tree stump. Okay? That's the wood block. Okay? And then you have a pattern. Did you see those block prints that I made? You put that pattern down on the board, and then you follow that pattern and you cut them. That's how the wood blocks are kind of produced and carved. We had another one?
How much does that small print cost?
How much they cost?
Yes, if you're going to buy one small print like that.
Oh, I don't know. How much you want to pay? All right. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not. How much do you think I got paid for one print?
$500.
For one of those tiny prints, what was my wage? How much? $8. How much? Boy, you guys are brutal. One says $8 and the other one says 5 cents. Well, Russ, I mean, 5 cents was probably what it was my first year. No, if I did all those 15 processes correctly, and I got a saleable print, I was paid $3 a print. That was my wage. So the only reason I could stay in the studio is because I had a full-time job. They would, typically you don't apprentice unless you can support yourself by doing the art. So I was very fortunate to spend as long as I did at that studio for sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. So they're running out of ideas. It's the end of the 19th century, and they're running out of ideas. They've gone to the landscape prints because suddenly traveling and getting to know Japan is very popular. What had happened was when Japan closed its doors in about 1640, closed its ports, it became an isolated country for 160 years. And there was a new sheriff in town, and he resided in Tokyo. And so all the shoguns and all the daimyos, they had to make a trip every year to Tokyo. It didn't matter if you were from Hiroshima in the south or Hokkaido in the north. You were required to make a pilgrimage to visit Tokugawa in Tokyo. And so that generated a huge economy because you had people that had to take care. And they didn't travel like 4 or 5. They traveled 150, 160 people at a time, the big ones, okay? So that's a lot of horseshoes, that's a lot of food, that's a lot of inns, that's a lot of tea houses where the geisha are. That's true, right? So they were able to hold on to the landscape prints for some time, okay, because they did the 53 stages, okay? The 53 stages are all the stops that you had to stop at and show your passport to go to the next prefecture, okay? But now they're running out of energy. There's just nothing left, and Japan is opened up to the west now, and ukiyo-e, the Japanese woodblock print, is no longer cool. But suddenly there's a new feature, and it's the gradation. If you look at the skyline and you look at the waterline, can you see? And the skyline in the back, can you see the 3 gradations going on?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to look at a print now. This is my teacher, and he's doing a gradation, and he's doing the gradation for this print right here. This is the print he's doing the gradation for up on top. This is the grandson. Okay. So he's applying the ink now to the board up top. So there it is, there's no gradation, you can see. He's going over that yellow color. He's settling the paper because he wants the paper to be flat before he starts rubbing it. You see that big bump on his thumb? The heel of his thumb? Listen to how hard he's rubbing it. There you have the print. And they're saying, wow, that's really good. Let's make all of them just like this one. Okay? All right. We're going to stop right here. We'll stop it right here. He's showing now this bottom. This is called a bedding bottom. Bedding means like ball bearings. And my teacher uses the bedding bottom because when you use a traditional bottom like this one, eventually the bamboo covering is going to wear down like after 2 days and you have to change it. That means that you have to wrap it in a new piece of bamboo. So he's using a bedding bottom, and the bedding bottom was invented in the Yoshida studio where I studied. The reason being that around 1960, the quality of the paper began changing. And they weren't able to pull the wood grain, okay? If you look at this picture right here, there's wood grain in it. They weren't able to pull the wood grain off as easily because of the paper. And they were still producing traditional Japanese prints. And so they had a little contest between the three of them. There was Toshi Yoshida, who is this artist here, and another artist named Yuki Rei, and then the Yoshida printer. And they all came up with their idea for the bedding bottom. Okay? This is actually an original that was given to me by a dear friend, made by the printer in the Yoshida studio. So, with the brush, this is the brush that he was using, or a brush very similar. And with these brushes, we talked about sharpening the brushes, okay? When you sharpen the brush, it becomes very, very smooth, and you can control the amount of ink that you put on the board, okay? Now with this gradation, when you touch the board and you have that ink here, you've got to keep that angle going. If you move the brush, then that ink begins creeping down the horsehair, and suddenly your gradation line grows from this to this. So this is why you sharpen your brushes and you make them very, very fine, and so that you can control the amount of ink, and also you can control how much ink movement is going on when you're doing a gradation. Okay, so and then that takes a very, very long time to learn. It kind of drove me crazy, but I kind of got it in the end. So now we've got the bottom, we've got the brushes, we got the gradation, and we have the bottom. Okay? Inside this, as you can see, we have a bamboo coil. These are actually strands of bamboo tied together, and they're wrapped until you get a coil like this. Okay? You get a coil like this. Then you have a disc. These are very, very interesting discs because they're created with 47 pieces of Japanese paper. So you have it almost looks like a little taiko drum, like a drum, and you put one piece of paper on it and you lacquer it, and that sits a day. Then you put another layer on, and another layer on for 47 days. And then you get the traditional Japanese disc. This one's really cool. It actually has pictures of ukiyo-e inside it. So that's the bottom. Oops, we're not quite done with old Japan yet. Yeah, so there you can see the 47 paper linings and the outer shell. Okay, so one of these take about a year, and they cost about $1,200 today. And there's only 1 or 2 people left in Japan making them. Okay, as Daryl said, I won't dwell any longer. So we're going to say goodbye to old Japan. We're going to say goodbye to the samurai and the courtesans and the beautiful, beautiful kimonos. This is right towards the end of the old Japan printmaking. And they, as I said, they were getting disparate, and so they made 3 prints. They started making rows of prints, okay, series. Good. Okay. So now we are finally in the 20th century, and there are some studios that survive. And the 2 studios we're just going to briefly look at. One is called the Watanabe Studio. They began in 1909, and they still exist. Now, what is a studio? Well, the traditional art that I'm talking about has a carver, a printer, a designer, and the publisher. There's 4 parts, okay? So all those prints that we've been looking at, there was a designer who sent their brush design to the carver carved the boards, who gave them to the printer printed, and then the publisher was responsible for marketing, okay? That's a traditional studio, okay? The Watanabe Studio is still very, very influential, and they sold chiefly to Americans. They found a market, and so there was this new interest, but they had to figure out, because the British weren't particularly interested in geisha, and so the artists wanted to start making their own art, for example, watercolors. And so Hosei and the next gentleman here, Yoshida Hiroshi, which is the founder of my studio in 1925. Yoshida, the interesting thing about all these artists that I'm introducing from now on is that they all of them came from a different art form. Yoshida Hiroshi was an oil painter in the Western tradition and a watercolorist in the British tradition. At 40 years of age, he started a studio, and he learned how to carve, how to print. He could carve as well and print as well as anybody he hired in the studio. He was a hiker. This is just one example of his art. He did one print of a waterfall. He had 89 wood blocks in it. It almost killed him, literally, but he did it. Okay, here we have a close-up of what's happening with the new carving, what people are doing with these newfound freedoms. This is actually a piece that's just carved on veneer. Okay, so what happens is when Japan opens up to, let's say, the Western influence or Western market, everything Japanese is no longer cool, and government subsidies are lost. For example, there was the breakup of the samurai class. Well, that was devastating, because as a samurai, you had to renew your entire outfit and your sword every 25 years. That was a requirement. So all of these sword makers, all of these, all of the outfitters, everything that was involved in these traditional arts, they all lost their jobs. Okay, so the same thing happened in the print industry. So people also experienced a great freedom, because now they're not tied to carving somebody else's design, somebody else's, printing somebody else's work. They had a lot of artistic freedom. The first person we're going to look at, his name is Munakata. Can you see him? He's bent over this board like that. He's got a chisel in his hand, and he's just chiseling away. That's because Munakata was almost blind. When he carved real close to the boards. And he carved in the beginning in black and white. There was a movement, it was called, let's call it the folk art movement, Minge, in Japan, and they wanted to just express the folk culture. But what's interesting here is that you can finally see the marks of the artist, meaning you can see all the chisel marks that he leaves on the board. All those marks up there, but that's just the remnants of the chisel. There's nothing particularly finesse about it. And then, of course, the little poem. But Munakata did come up with something new, and that is he began putting color on the back of the paper. Okay, so he would put splotches of color on the board and then lay the back of the paper down and print from the front. So all these colors that you're seeing from Munakata, all those colors are coming through from the back of the paper. Okay, we call that backside printing. So this was kind of a unique new way because you can see all the white lines. Well, they're not all white because you got purple and red from all of that backside printing, right? So he's not carving 17 blocks like I had to do. Okay? He's carving a black and white print, and then he's putting the color down on the block, and then he's rubbing on the front, and the color's coming through. That guy's smart. That's why he was able to make like 7,000 prints while he was alive. I mean, I'm laboring away, I'm one print a year. Smart guy. Yeah, so that's Shiko Munakata. This is also an interesting artist. He comes from kind of the proletariat movement in Japan, 1930s. His name is Tadashiro Ono. And he also does something very interesting with his prints. Because what he does to start the prints is he prints the entire white page in black first. He covers the entire print in black. And then he puts the other colors over it. So there you have the Eiffel Tower. All of that's done in black. You can see the red, the green's trying to come through. Tokyo Tower. And all these black lines, of course, are all the chisel marks. Okay? So you have this really strong movement of just showing the after effects of the Japanese chisel. Okay? So there you have Ono's Paris and Shiko's Paris. Okay, so we're back to the kimonos again. I know. But the kimonos are very interesting. This is a kimono stencil. This is made from Japanese paper, strong paper. It's treated in some kind of persimmons juice that makes the paper very strong, and it's carved with a knife. Okay? These are carved with a knife. I know you can't see it very well, but it's up on the screen, and they're put down on the fabric, and dye is applied, and you get the kimono. So what happens when all this freedom from the studios breaking up, what happens is all these other artists from different art traditions get excited about this. So there's a guy named Sado Watanabe. He's a kimono dyer, kimono printer, and he decides to make his own woodblock prints using stencil patterns. And he specialized, or he liked biblical prints. So this is from Matthew. 21:16, or verse 1 through 16. And it's the parable of the laborers in the field. And this is a black and white print, just like the start. Then he moves on and he does 3-color prints, just like they did before. The 3-color prints. But the paper changes because in order to do these kinds of prints, when you put down a color, you have to put down a paste to block out where you don't want the color to go. So this paper, once they're done with the one printing, they wash it, and they hang it up to dry, and then they apply the other color. Okay? So the paper is very, very special. And then you have another print. Very simple. As you can see, the dark lines from the ukiyo-e. But again, you know, these very traditional Japanese colors. So the thing is, they never quite leave the tradition. They're always working in the tradition. They can't leave it. Here's another gentleman, Yoshitoshi Mori. He was also a kimono dyer and printer, and he gets involved. He belongs to this folk craft. This is actually This is actually the celebration of December month, and they're getting ready for New Year's. They're preparing some New Year's paddles for the paddle game. And then he pays his little tribute to Munakata, only he's stencil dyeing from the front of the print itself. And I'm not sure, but it looks like maybe he's doing something with Northwest American Indian prints there, perhaps influenced. But again, very, very basic, and this is this folk culture kind of expression. All of these artists were very, very popular, became very, 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 very famous. And there we go, the last geisha for tonight, folks. Okay. All right. Okay. Now we're going to move to this gentleman here, Tadashi Nakayama. He studied in Italy. He was very much interested in icons and working with metal or metallic inks, and also in the mastery of this baden. So he says, the baden, after all, should be not simply a tool in the mechanical sense, but rather an extension of one's own body, as open to and cognizant of tactile sensation as one's own bare hands. This goes for the large number of other tools in the production of a woodblock print. My experience in the Japanese studio was largely a confrontation of a verbal and a non-verbal culture. I'm a verbal learner, therefore I ask questions. Looking back on my experience, I think my asking my teacher questions the way I did was kind of an imposition on him. He was not, these artisans do not teach by explanation or answering questions. And sometimes he would say to me emphatically, "Kotae ga nai," which means there is no answer. And getting back to this quotation here, so I would say, how do you do this? Or, and he'd always say, "Kimuchi desu," which means it's about the feels, son. It's about the feels. Okay? And I finally started to understand that. Right? You have these tools and you just got to kind of become, as they say, one with the product, right? Let's look at some of his art. Here's one called The Road of Butterflies. He uses 18 boards, 25 colors, and 33 rubbing processes. Okay? So this is why the paper is so important. Because the paper has to hold up to being rubbed 33 times, often very vigorously. Okay? Here's another one. And these are huge prints. These are huge. Okay? Like butterflies, you have the pagoda, you have the butterflies, you have the girl. 16 boards, 44 colors, 54 rubbings. And typically he would produce each run in a number of 60. Here's a butterfly horse with the Italian influence. It doesn't come out very well in the picture, but you can see the metallic inks that he's using. So when the sunlight or a candlelight moves over these, you get this lovely flickering kind of shading and shadowy effects. Very, very beautiful. Now we have Toshi Yoshida, who is the son of Hiroshi Yoshida, founding of the studio. This is two of his works here. Yoshida-san died in 1995, but this is his work here. This was his first print that he made, he carved in 1930. And when I was working in the studio, this bird was actually up on the shelf, like the stuffed animal that he used for this model. Okay, so he started like this, and he did very traditional prints for a long time because his father was Hiroshi Yoshida, and Hiroshi wasn't having any of this modern stuff. Okay, but about the time Hiroshi passed away, which was in 1950, this started happening. Okay, so probably influenced by the Mayan culture. They were world travelers. But what starts happening here is that you start having color overlays, and you're no longer printing really hard on the paper. Okay, there's a technique that they use where they take the baden and they put it on the woodblock and they just float it across the paper. It's just picking up sprinklings or specklings of the ink. And so you get this very mottled effect. And then you do color layings over that. And so you get this wonderful mixture of colors. Here's the one that we have here today. This is unknown. And what's remarkable about this print, of course, is all the gradations. There's a gradation above the vertical lines above, or rather the horizontal lines above, on the mountain or whatever that shape is. On the other hill, there's 7 different gradations that are at work there. This is a print called Mendocino Sunrise, with a very, very intense and special gradation effect. We call it the donut gradation. I tried it on one of my prints. It didn't come out quite as beautiful as that. But it's really amazing because in the center of this circle here, you can't really see it, but right in the center of that all, he's got really fine carved lines in it, right? And so it bursts out all that color, right? So a lot of it has to do with the carving as well. And here we have a good example of the color overlaying. So he probably has a light gray blue that he starts out with, and then he starts laying colors over it. His pictures vibrate, and the after images are just tremendous. Like when I was working in the studio and I got to look at like the Mendocino Sunrise, I'd go in and look at it, and the next morning I'd get in the shower and I'd still see those colors. It was just so amazing, the vibrancy and the energy of these colors. It's just totally unbelievable, and I try to emulate that kind of effect in my work as well. Yeah. So, finally get to the highlight of the show tonight. I, as you can see, I'm interested in fabrics, kimono, and dyeing, and I print on mosquito netting. This is just 3 boards, actually it's 4 boards. I have 3 boards. One is printed in yellow, one is printed in red, and one is printed in blue. But then you get all the colors coming off of that.
but I use mosquito netting, and in doing so, first thing it does is it embosses the paper. That mosquito netting will emboss the paper. I'm printing with a bedding bottom, and it's embossing the paper. When you emboss the paper like that, what happens is when the light comes down and it gets in that very fine embossing, it refracts out, and depending on the time of day or what kind of light source you're using, you get different color effects. So you have like a quilted texture with varying colors. This is a print that I made, and I used MDF board. So I'm no longer using wood. MDF board gives a really nice sharp edge. And I'm pretty lazy, so for the gradation, you see the butterfly wings and the gradation there? All I did was slap some polyurethane around it, and I put ink on it, and the polyurethane prints a different color than the original. So I don't have to go through all that brush problem. I just do the poor man's gradation with polyurethane, okay? Yeah, it's top secret stuff here, you know, take notes, yeah. And then also for the dots, I just used gesso. And I used acrylic ink for the gesso. So you have gesso, you have polyurethane, and MDF board. Have fun. But the only thing with MDF board is you need a really sharp knife. This is Elephantasies. I know it's late and you're probably sleepy, so I'm gonna tell you a bedtime story and I'll let you go, okay? I guess you don't know much about Hindu mythology or the cosmic egg, but once upon a time, I don't know if you know anything about Indian philosophy, but they have like time periods that are like squillions and trillions of years. So there was a cosmic egg and it broke open, and when the cosmic egg broke open, 8 pairs of elephants came out. And they were put in charge of each cardinal point, okay? And they floated around for a squillion trillion years, and they got bored. And this particular couple here ended up spotting Earth, and they came down. One of them landed on a tree. Well, it was rather unlucky because the tree that this elephant landed on was the one that the Buddha was sitting under. And the Buddha was just about ready to get into nirvana. And the Buddha had been sitting there for a squillion trillion years too, okay? So what happened was this twig hit the Buddha, and the Buddha looked up and saw this elephant and said, "Oh, so you want to be a land creature?" And that's how elephants became land creatures. And when I read it, nobody told me the story. This is the first time it's ever been shared orally, okay? But when I heard this story, I thought, wow, how do you make an elephant float? Right? And so that's what I was trying to do. The green marks, all the green marks are is the tracing of the brush itself. I left the tracing of the brush on it. The little white squiggly marks is a cabinet, a cedar cabinet that I tore off one of the cabinets in the Yoshida studio and I embossed. And then the little splotches is that printing that I was telling you about where you just run it very softly over. I did it 5 or 6 times so that you got that kind of splotching effect. Okay. So